strongest forecasting tools and experts at hand. But under the Trump administration, that's not happening. Instead, Trump is hell-bent on gutting, degrading, and setting our weather research and storm warning systems up for failure. And it's all very intentional. NOAA facilities in South and Central Florida are currently understaffed by 20 to 40%. John Morales, the most senior meteorologist in South Florida, raised doubts on air that he may be unable to provide accurate forecasts due to a lack of critical data. If Trump continues to push expert NOAA, NWS, and FEMA staff out the door through layoffs and forced retirements, people will needlessly die. Just look at the billionaire bailout bill Trump just signed. It cancels $200 million more for improved weather forecasting and community resiliency projects, which will only make our natural disasters worse. If we fail to bolster our weather emergency infrastructure amid worsening climate change, more people will needlessly die. Americans want better government, not a gutted government, and certainly not no government at all. But that's what Trump is pushing on America. And I say pushing it on us because no one voted for this. Voters told Republicans to quickly lower household costs. Instead, Trump, with the acquiescence of Republicans in Congress, signed the One Big Ugly bill into law that poll after poll said no one wants. Trump is now proposing cutting an additional $2.2 billion from NOAA and to eliminate the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, NOAA's main research arm. The laboratory in Miami provides the models and scientific backbone that we use to forecast storm intensity and paths. This is a generational loss for public safety and science. Shuttering more than 24 world-class weather and climate labs, which Trump has proposed, risks losing 75 years of research history. And mind you, we're reminding Trump and Republicans of all of this in the middle of hurricane season. I can tell you that I do a hurricane briefing to update the community and help prepare everyone for the onset of hurricane season every single year. Many of our special guests today have joined me in those briefings for years. And the one through line, the one thread that is a certainty is that our investment in weather research, the advancements in being able to forecast the onset of storms, has shrunk our cone of uncertainty here in South Florida, has given people more notice, has made emergency management more manageable, and that's just been critical. And local and state governments can't fill these gaps. Kerr County, Texas didn't buy a warning system after its last big flood because they didn't have the financial resources. But while Trump starves federal emergency preparedness systems, he's choking off all kinds of aid to states too. And we know the horrific human toll that these cuts can inflict. The later that warnings of impending disastrous weather arrive, the less time we have to plan, fortify, or evacuate. Trump isn't helping us look out for each other. He's abandoning everyone. These cuts don't even make financial sense. Every major hurricane can bring billions in damage, easily more than NOAA's entire proposed budget. Killing off preventative investments invites steeper losses for taxpayers. And I'll give you just one example. Last year, I led Florida's bipartisan appropriators to secure nearly $400 million to buy new Hurricane Hunter airplanes. We did that together. Yet Trump's budget plan eliminates that funding. Plus, he wants to slash flight hours in half, leaving local emergency managers flying blind, literally, when lives are on the line. These cuts are not about fiscal responsibility. They're about silencing science and weakening our national resilience in the face of weather disasters that we know are going to come. But with these cuts that Trump proposed, we would be intentionally tying our hands behind our back and blindfolding ourselves. Now, some of my severe storm state colleagues and key experts are going to walk through more of what's at stake. With that, it's my privilege to introduce a leader who has championed these issues and fights for our communities time and again, my friend and colleague, the former Democratic whip, Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina.
Well, thank you very much, Debbie, for inviting me to be a part of this today. I am joining you and others all across the country and around the world, wishing God's good graces upon those who are suffering this unimaginable flood result there in Texas. And it is a reminder to all of us of that old adage that most of us grew up with, if not all. It is better to have and not need than to need and not have. And that is so fundamental to what is taking place in Texas today. Now, I have the great honor, and I might add the responsibility, of representing the entire peninsula of Charleston, South Carolina. That city originated as a peninsula, and though they have expanded the city limits into other places, the fact of the matter, that place is really a peninsula. And so we are subjected to all kinds of storms. Some we expect and get prepared for. But there are other parts of my congressional district that will not spend a lot of time preparing for hurricanes, because that's not a part of their everyday goings and comings. So it was when Helene visited us several years ago. Now, when Hugo came back in 1989, we expected it, we were prepared for it, but we had no idea that the damage would be what it was. But when you have the hurricanes coming into areas like Aiken, South Carolina, that have never experienced anything like that before, and right across the Savannah River in Augusta, Georgia, I visited both those places after that hurricane. Nobody had ever seen anything like it, and nobody expected to ever see anything like it in those two communities, one in South Carolina, the other across the line in Georgia. But that is what we're faced with today. We may argue all we want about what may or may not be the cause. Those who consider climate change as a hoax, let me remind you, study the science, and you'll know that climate change is not a hoax. It is a reality, and it's a reality that we are living with, and it's a reality that we must be prepared to confront. And for us to see budget considerations leaving out the response that we need from FEMA and from the forecasters is just beyond comprehension. And I just believe that those of us who live with these eventualities, those of us who have the responsibility of representing the people who are going to be subjected to these eventualities, we have the responsibility to do what is necessary to not just give the warnings, but also be prepared to respond to their needs when they are presented. And so thank you so much, Debbie, for continuing your good work in this area. I'm very pleased to be a part of helping you. And I also know that there is another one with us today who is not just experiencing these matters, but also very sensitive to them and who has lived through them. And I'm speaking of Lois Frankel. Thank you, Lois, for being with us. I look forward to seeing the two of you next week when we get back to Washington. Hopefully, we'll get a little more sanity next week than we got last week and can respond to this in a way that will make our constituents happy. With that, Lois, unmute yourself.
Yes, there we go. Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your very articulate, forceful words. And good to be with you, Debbie and Sheila, and all these weather experts. Like you, Debbie, my heart goes out to all those who impacted by the horrendous tragedy of the flooding in Texas, and then again last night in New Mexico. As a former mayor of West Palm Beach, I know what it's like to face weather disaster. I led my city through 4 hurricanes and saw firsthand the power of nature and the life-saving importance of early warning systems. We had roofs blown off, power out for weeks, roads blocked, and even one hurricane, we completely lost our water system, our 911 system. But thankfully, no lives were lost. And that's because we had 2 or 3 days' notice, advance warning from NOAA, the backbone of our nation's weather system. And NOAA can do, and they did what our local and state governments simply cannot do. They use satellites, radar, aircraft. They track storms, and they issue watches and warnings coordinating with FEMA and our local officials. And because of the NOAA warnings, we were able to evacuate people early from high-risk areas. Families put up their storm shutters. They stocked up on food and water. Dangerous debris was removed from streets. Flashlights and batteries and backup supplies were ready. Emergency contractors were put on standby to remove fallen trees. Without those alerts, the destruction, the desperation, the injuries, and yes, deaths would have occurred. Without NOAA, we would have been flying blind. Last year, hurricanes again the hurricanes came into Florida. We had Hilton and Milton right here, deadly tornadoes and in Palm Beach County. And NOAA is warning us that yes, this is going to could be a bad hurricane season. And that's why Trump's proposed cuts are not just reckless, they are dangerous. The slashing of over $1 billion, almost $2 billion from NOAA's budget, the firing of people, something like 2,000 NOAA employees have been fired or forced out, including 600 from the National Weather Service. And let me be clear, these cuts threaten the safety, family, and businesses across Florida and our nation. Even though the Commerce Department actually just exempted the National Weather Service from the hiring freeze, and yet jobs still haven't been posted for 126 positions, which is not going to quite make up for what's been lost. Every year, South Florida braces for hurricane season. We depend on accurate forecasts, timely alerts, and science-based guidance to keep our families safe. And thank you so much to the weather experts here. And the deadly floods in Florida, where over 100 people have died, including children, hundreds still missing, is a tragic reminder of what's at stake. We should be strengthening NOAA, not gutting it. We must stop these dangerous cuts before the hurricane hits us. This is an alert. And with that, again, I thank, great to be with my colleagues, and I'm going to turn this over to Sheila Sheffield McCormick, my great neighbor here in Palm Beach County. And I thank you all. See you next week.
Thank you so much, Lois. Thank you so much, Debbie, for having us today. Thank you so much, Leader Claiborne, for joining us also. And thank you for our expert. I'm Congresswoman Sheila Sheffield McCormick, and my heart is breaking for all the families who lost their children, lost lives. We're looking at the devastation. We're looking at the climate change, the rising heat, the rising melting glades. And it just really, really hurts my heart, but also makes it even more imperative that we really start pushing back on these cuts that we're seeing to NOAA. As of right now, we know that 10% of their staff has been cut. They're proposing to cut another 17%. When we compound that, that's 27% of the staff that would be cut. That would help us actually find out more information about these storms, these hurricanes, these floods that can protect and save several lives. But we're also looking at cuts of $1.8 billion to that budget. Where would we be if we go through with all these cuts? I'm afraid with this climate, the rising floods that we've seen, that it would devastate not just one area, but most of our country. In Fort Lauderdale, we've seen back-to-back floods that have devastated homes and people, taken lives, but also has hurt many small businesses that took them months and months to recover, including the airport. And now, as we're looking at this rising climate change and the rising sea levels, how can we actually say this is the moment to cut? If we do go forward with these cuts, we would be playing Russian roulette with American lives. And that is not what the American people have hired us to do. They have hired us, they voted for this administration to move forward so we can protect their lives and actually have innovation when it comes to protecting them, when it comes to flood warnings, when it comes to actually being able to track storms and weather patterns. And that's what we need to be doing. We really need to be funding NOAA to this full amount. We saw funding before at 6.6 billion. We need to be on an upward trajectory to make sure that we're protecting the American people. Ignoring climate change, ignoring this rising sea levels, ignoring the floods that have been devastating Americans time and time again, year after year after year. We're seeing more rains that are record-breaking. At this point, it is no longer record-breaking. This is our new normal, and we must fund to the level that would allow us to protect the American people at this new level. And that's why it's so important that we're actually pushing this issue right now, that everyone's being made aware, and that this administration would change course and start funding NOAA to its accurate levels that are necessary to protect us. So I thank the experts for being here and shedding light on what's actually going on. And I also thank everyone who's paying attention to this issue. And as we move forward, we need to move forward bipartisanly. We need the administration, we need everybody to come on the same page and realize that our job to the American people is to protect them first. And once they are protected, then we could look at what other places we can do cuts. But to go forward in this climate, in this situation, in this manner, is nothing less than reckless and unconscionable. Thank you so much for having me today, Debbie, and thank you so much for everyone who's here today. And I'd like to pass it back to Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila and Lois and Whip Clyburn. It is really helpful and important to have your thoughtful perspectives. Most importantly here, we have the world-renowned experts in weather weather prediction, in weather expertise. And I want to first kick off by giving us an opportunity to hear from one of the most respected voices in this field, a scientist whose work improved the accuracy of forecasts and saved countless lives. Dr. Robert Atlas, the former longtime director of NOAA's Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. Say that 3 times fast. Dr. Atlas.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in this briefing. After serving as an operational forecaster in the U.S. Air Force, and then as a research scientist for NASA for 32 years, I became the director of NOAA's Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory located in South Florida. AOML is one of NOAA's major research laboratories, and like several other labs in OAR, it has as one of its main goals the improvement of weather forecasting. AOML, in conjunction with its partners, performs a wide range of activities that have contributed to very significant improvements in hurricane forecasting. These include the development of new observing systems and advanced hurricane forecast models, improving how observations are assimilated into the models, flying into hurricanes and deploying airborne drones and ocean gliders to provide critical measurements for improving both the model predictions and our understanding of key hurricane processes that also improves the models. I'd like to show a figure of the improvements that have been made. I know this isn't too clear being held up like this, but there have been constant improvements over the years since we started a hurricane forecast improvement project in NOAA. And every year, the errors in our track and our intensity forecasts have been reduced. And this is particularly important because previously there had been no improvement in hurricane intensity forecasting. In forecasting the intensity of hurricanes, where they will make landfall, and being able to extend the forecast lead time on those is extraordinarily important. The elimination of AOML and its cooperative institute at the University of Miami can have a very detrimental effect on hurricane forecasts for our nation. There would be no more scientific support for NOAA's Hurricane Hunter missions, as well as for airborne drones and ocean gliders. All of this expertise exists in the Hurricane Research Division and the Physical Oceanography divisions of AOML. As a result, vital data would no longer be assimilated into hurricane models or be available to forecasters and researchers. In addition, there would be a halt in the development and improvement of models like NOAA's state-of-the-art hurricane analysis and forecast system, which produces the most accurate intensity forecasts of any model in the world. It is estimated that this loss, the loss of AOML and its cooperative institute, would result in a 20 to 40% decrease in hurricane forecast accuracy, which would cost the economy more than $10 billion for a single hurricane season if only 2 major hurricanes were to hit the United States. This cost to the economy is 20 times larger than all of the budget cuts to OAR that are proposed. But even more disturbing would be the probability of increased loss of life if hurricane forecast accuracy decreases. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Atlas. I just also want to point out that the administration completely rescinded the funding that we worked hard to obtain for the Hurricane Hunter planes. I mean, completely. So, I mean, that was a bipartisan effort that we had Republican members of Congress and Democratic members of Congress sign a joint letter supporting and asking for. And I mean, the impact on not having those flights and those additional planes, because the planes that we have in the air, at my briefings, I heard for many years that they were, getting old, and that we needed, the most updated technology, but also that we needed to make sure we had planes in the air that were safe and not badly in need of repair. So I just wanted to make sure we added that as well. So thank you so much. And now I will introduce the really someone with decades of experience at the heart of hurricane forecasting, former branch chief at NOAA's National Hurricane Center, Dr. James Franklin. Dr. Franklin?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to give a forecaster's perspective on how NHC's products and services have been improved by NOAA labs and cooperative institutes, and touch on some of the consequences of these budget cuts, the proposed cuts. NOAA research benefits virtually all aspects of NHC's operations, from data gathering to analysis to modeling, forecasting, and communicating risk. And I want to list 5 major NOAA research contributions that would come up in any hurricane shift day to day through the heart of the hurricane season. First, when forecasters prepare the tropical weather outlooks, they'll consult satellite-based wind and moisture analyses prepared by a NOAA institute. And other satellite tools from that institute help NHC estimate the strength and size of hurricanes when they're outside the range of reconnaissance aircraft. Second, when storms threaten land, NHC relies on instruments released from the NOAA G4 jet that measure the currents that steer storms from place to place. And these data improve hurricane forecasts by 10 to 20%. P3 missions that collect Doppler radar data from the Hurricane Core improve some model forecasts by 30%. And it's NOAA researchers who staff these flights. Third, when estimating storm strength and size from aircraft data, forecasters use an algorithm developed at a NOAA lab, and an instrument that was first tested on the P3s but now exists throughout the Hurricane Hunter fleet on all the Air Force aircraft as well. Fourth, when it's time to make the forecast, NHC's hurricane specialists will consult models that were either partly or entirely developed by NOAA research. And you may have heard some of these names: the SHIPS model, LGEM, and HAVS, which Bob mentioned just a moment ago, or SHIPS RI, which is the first tool to successfully forecast rapid intensification, came from NOAA research. And fifth and last, some of you may remember Max Mayfield always warning us not to focus on the skinny black line. Well, now we don't have to, because the time of arrival graphics that are on the NHC webpage now help quantify and communicate risk to emergency managers and the general public. All of these data and tools are available to forecasters because of NOAA research. And there are so many more that I don't have time to mention now, but maybe they'll come up in the Q&A. So what happens at NHC if NOAA research is shut down? Well, right away, the Doppler radar missions that I mentioned would stop, along with the forecast improvements that they bring. Almost certainly by next year, some of the most important intensity models would fall out of service, degrading NHC's intensity forecasts. The websites that provide forecasters with crucial satellite analyses would break. Intensity estimates for storms outside of aircraft range would be degraded, and the formation forecasts for disturbances would likely become less accurate. In the long term, I do think that the track forecast would probably continue to improve, but at a slower pace. The intensity forecasts, though, I'm really concerned there because they would likely stagnate or even regress. In the last 25 years, track errors have been cut in half, and intensity errors have been cut in third, and much of that's due to NOAA research. If we decide to give up our best chances for more observations, improved models, better products and services, my fear is that we're going to look back 25 years from now and say, this is when the progress stopped. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Franklin. I just really want to point out that not only in the briefings that I've had, but we've seen with our own eyes through our weather forecasters and meteorologists on TV that we've had very late-breaking intensity increases of recent storms, like within the day or day and a half, where a storm would go from a 3 to a 5 or a 1 to a 3 and hit much harder. So if we have a degradation in our ability to forecast intensity, and we have a degradation in our ability to impact and shorten the timing in which we can notify people, then people are going to die. That's just and more severe property loss will occur, and the economic impact will be very, very significant, to say the least. So thank you so much for your valuable insight. Now we'll hear from a renowned scientist who led NOAA's Hurricane Research Division and spearheaded improvements in hurricane forecasting, Dr. Frank Marks. Dr. Marks?
Thank you, Congressman. Good morning. My name is Dr. Frank Marks. I am the former director of NOAA's Hurricane Research Division, based within the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory here in Miami. Hurricane Research Division is the latest incarnation of government-supported hurricane research that began in 1956 after a number of devastating hurricanes hit New England and the east coast of the U.S. in the early 1950s. The U.S. Weather Bureau at that time recognized that research was needed in order to improve hurricane forecasts and formed what they called the National Hurricane Research Project. For the last 69 years, U.S. government-supported hurricane research through different incarnations and names steadfastly improved our ability to forecast hurricanes by using observations from aircraft, satellites, and ground-based radars to better characterize these storms over their lifetime. These unique observations, combined with the research expertise of the scientists who collected them, have led to steady improvements of forecast guidance that we see today. In my 45 years as a NOAA hurricane researcher, I have flown into over 250 hurricanes and tropical storms on the NOAA research aircraft, collecting and analyzing observations of the structure of these storms. My NOAA hurricane research colleagues work closely with other NOAA operational partners, cooperative institute researchers, other government researchers, and academia to utilize these unique observations to develop statistical and numerical guidance products for the National Hurricane Center. Through bipartisan support, Congress has repeatedly supported this approach, most recently passing the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act in 2017, Public Law 11525. They stipulated that NOAA should maintain a project to improve hurricane forecasting, the Hurricane Forecasting Improvement Program, that began in 2009 in response to particularly deadly and damaging hurricanes in 2004 and 2005. Since its inception, the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program has dramatically decreased forecast error. Track and wind speed errors have declined by about 40% in less than 15 years. The proposed budget cuts to NOAA research will effectively terminate this extremely successful research and operational collaboration. Loss of the research expertise in NOAA and these cooperative institutes will make it harder to mitigate the impacts of hazardous weather, such as from the landfall of Hurricane Helene last year, or that occurred recently in Texas, making them the norm. You will not see anything better. Loss of research expertise will impede the development of new forecast guidance products that address uncertainty, hindering the goals of the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project set out under the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act. Loss of research expertise and observations and their characterization of these devastating storms will obstruct the development of new forecasting approaches, including those utilizing artificial intelligence, as they require research expertise for development and training. In a nutshell, these impacts are going to severely hamper the development of hurricane forecast guidance products that the National Hurricane Center has found so useful. And I'll thank you for that time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Marks. I appreciate all of our experts joining us, and Mike, we're happy to take questions.
Okay, so if you have a question, please use the raise your hand function. We will open your mic and you'll introduce yourself and say your question. So we're going to call on Action News Jax, the CBS Fox affiliate in Jacksonville.
Hey, Jake Stofan, Action News Jax, a reporter over here. Was curious, I was kind of hearing sort of two things. One, the short-term concerns in NOAA's ability to forecast hurricanes, let's say this season, and also the more long-term concerns about the lack of, improving forecasts over the, coming years. Could you maybe lay out, and whoever wants to take this is free to do so, some of the specific cuts that raise concerns about the ability for people to trust hurricane forecasts, let's say this season?
Which of our experts wants to take that?
I can start,
James,
if you like. So there are a couple things I think that concern me for this year. First of all, many of the National Weather Service forecast offices are not able to send up the weather balloons twice a day because of short staffing. Now, these can leave holes in the data that initialize our computer models. Now, many of the holes will get filled by other types of data, satellite data, and we don't necessarily know in advance which of these data gaps are going to be crucial. But if you have a hurricane approaching Florida or South Carolina, East Coast, and perhaps we have a weather system coming across the US that might either turn that storm harmlessly out to sea or allow it to continue to moving west. Those data over the continental US, those weather balloons, could create a poor initial analysis in the models that could lead us to miss one of those turns. And it's going to be really hard to know in advance. So what that does is it just lessens the confidence that we have that any particular forecast this season is going to be accurate, because we don't know when those holes are going to turn out to be significant. The one other point is that the staffing, I'm worried about when we have an event, that the WFOs are not going to have enough people to talk to emergency managers and to help them make decisions about what's happening at the local level. The Hurricane Center is pretty well staffed, but the Weather Service forecast offices aren't. And there's so much communication that goes on over a 2 and 3 day period between EMs and the forecast offices to help them prepare. It's not like you can staff up for an overnight thing. These events are longer. And so I'm worried about that too.
Thank you. Dr. Atlas, did you have something to add? Can we unmute Dr. Atlas, please?
James gave a great answer. What I wanted to say was, when I first moved to South Florida, I went into the Florida Keys where my son lived, and my wife and I asked everyone we met, would they evacuate if a Category 5 hurricane was forecast to hit right here? And to a person, they said no. And what was needed was increasing the confidence in our hurricane forecasts. And that's what we've worked so hard for in NOAA research. Improving the accuracy means that people don't get overwarned anywhere near as much. We want to increase it even further so that people will take necessary actions and that people will evacuate. But the confidence levels increase tremendously as a result of the hurricane research. We don't want to lose that by having our accuracy decrease.
Can I just?
Yeah, so go ahead.
Absolutely the expert. No, go ahead.
I know what I was going to say, immediate response this year. I know that the Hurricane Research Division has lost about 25 to 30% of its staff, and probably 50% of the staff that would be on the research aircraft. And so that's going to be a major obstacle for us staffing that aircraft. And that'll mean likely less airborne Doppler radar data, less drops on support for the National Hurricane Center observations this year. And as James pointed out, those observations are kind of critical to the forecast guidance products from the numerical models. So that's an immediate impact. The further out you go, if the budget that exists that was just passed, that'll all go away. There will be nobody there. So this year, we're likely to have half as many and maybe some possible misses, but next year there'll be nobody.
I just want to clarify that the proposed cuts to closing all of the NOAA research labs are proposed by the president's budget for FY26, but the Appropriations Committee has not acted on those. So part of the reason that we're here is to help make sure people know what the devastating impact of those closures would be, and to make sure that we can encourage our colleagues in Congress, particularly on those on the Appropriations Committee, like Congresswoman Frankel and Congressman Clyburn and myself, to urge our Republican colleagues to not go along with the president's proposals, because those would be devastating.
Do we have a question?
I have a question. I just don't know how to raise my hand in the platform. I don't know if you can hear me.
Who is this?
Jennifer Vasquez, Local 10 News in Miami. I'm just not quite sure how to raise my hand on the cell phone version of the Zoom, but
we can hear you.
You go ahead. We can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so you just now addressed one part of the question that I wanted to drill down on. So I was looking at something that says in 2026, and it says, quote, NOAA will close the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. So two related questions. One, can you be really clear on that laboratory in Miami? What exactly functions out of that and the impact that would have to us regionally of hurricane preparedness if that were to close? And then two, and I think you just addressed it, has that already happened with the big, beautiful bill, or is there still some wiggle room to keep that laboratory existing?
I'd like to take this one as the former director of AOML.
Yes.
So AOML performs functions that are critical for hurricane forecasting. Some of the functions are operational in nature, such as manning the Hurricane Hunter flights for NOAA, processing the tail Doppler radar data and the dropzone data, and also innovating the aerial drones that are used. That's from an AOML scientist, and also launching ocean gliders to give us additional measurements that help us with intensity forecasting. The research that goes on at AOML is crucial to maintaining and improving the hurricane model forecast accuracy. AOML and its partners developed first the HWRF model, which showed tremendous ability to improve hurricane intensity forecasting, and the HAFS model, which is the current model that NOAA is using. All of the improvements that we want to make to that model to increase accuracy even further and to extend the lead time on hurricane warnings and forecasts would not occur if AOML is eliminated.
Two things on the process to answer your process question. The president has proposed the closure of all of the NOAA research laboratories across the country. There are a dozen of them, and that includes the major one that we have in Miami. And what's important to understand is that this is in the fiscal year 26 appropriations process. So the president has proposed the closure in his budget, but we have not yet acted on the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill in the House, and they have not yet done that in the Senate. However, even if the Republicans, who are in the majority in both houses, decide to not go along with, and hopefully that they won't, to not go along with those proposed cuts, with those proposed closures, they could reduce them dramatically in the budget and only leave them, partially funded. And quite frankly, even if the Republicans fully funded the NOAA research labs across the country, President Trump has really not respected the Article 1 responsibility of Congress for appropriations and has rescinded funding. That's why we have a 20 to 40, a huge reduction in force in the NOAA research centers already that we've been talked about. So he could just unilaterally reduce staff, fire people, close partial operations. He's really shown a penchant for just deciding to not spend funds as Congress intended, and then we pursue them with lawsuits, and some have been successful and some have not been. But the bottom line is that however the potential, whatever potential exists for the closure of these vital research labs, it is going to have devastating consequences, and we need to make sure that we prevent that from happening at all costs.
Let's go to another question from Action News Jacksonville.
Hey, it's Jake again. I think this question kind of bounces off that last one, and I just wanted to maybe get some clarity on what the proposed cuts are versus what cuts have already happened. It sounded like you were saying some of the staffing cuts, the 20 to 40% in the NOAA research facilities, that has materialized, and then the closing of the research labs. But there's also talk about the flights, the maintenance of the aircraft. If you could just kind of go through and say, this has happened, this is what could happen, just kind of for clarity.
Well, our experts can give you a sense. Our experts can give you a sense of what's already happened.
Frank, you want to take that?
Yeah, so in the Hurricane Research Division at AOML, we lost a number of our early new hires when they kind of cut people who were still on probation. Probably lost about 3 or 4 then. Then we lost another 3 or 4 to early retirement that was offered. some key personnel, and some others took other jobs just because of what was going on. Right now, we have very few people with expertise or experience who have flown in missions and can direct missions and can work on the aircraft. We're down to about 5 or 6 of those people. Matter of fact, as a volunteer, I volunteered to go if they need me. So that's how desperate it's getting. In terms of hurricane research, I mentioned this is 69 years of this. This is unique. Nowhere in the world exists the type of observations that NOAA or the USWW and now NOAA have collected. It is a unique place. It's the only place that has this kind of information. And that's why I mentioned it's critical if you're going to train artificial intelligence. It's going to be more than manpower. It's brain power, gray matter. It's really the people that make the research work more than the tools that we use.
I also just want to underscore that what has already happened, and the experts can correct me if I'm wrong, is that at the NOAA facilities in South and Central Florida, they are currently understaffed as a result of these reductions in force by 20 to 40%. And the big ugly bill canceled $200 million more that was already funded for improved weather forecasting and community resiliency projects that are designed to stave off the impact of natural disasters. So those things have already happened. And then the proposed closure of all of the NOAA research labs has been proposed, could not end up being included in the Commerce Justice Science Bill, but Republicans thus far have done much of what President Trump has proposed in his, initial proposed budgeting.
Let's go to Joan Murray from CBS Miami.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi,
Joan.
For you, Congresswoman, so just so we're clear, these are proposed cuts. It is not part of the big spending bill that just passed, correct? And you have yet to vote on this particular allocation for the closure of these particular facilities. Is that correct?
Yes, that
Okay.
part is correct. But there has already been a massive reduction in personnel at the Weather Service, Hurricane Research, and additionally $200 million in cuts to improved weather forecasting was in the bill, the big ugly bill that President Trump just signed.
Okay.
So
and
these
go ahead.
closures, Joan, are proposed, but they're in the president's budget. And if the Republicans follow their habit thus far, since we've been marking up appropriations bills, I'm gravely concerned that they will just go along with this. So
and the cuts that passed in the current bill mainly affect the staffing at the National Weather Service offices. Is that correct?
I need our experts to answer that question.
The cuts currently in place.
So the cuts that have already happened at the Weather Service occurred first due to the probationary employees being fired 4 months ago, or February, whenever that was. Then there were these buyouts that triggered a wave of early retirements. So those staff cuts occurred before this most recent bill passed. Those cuts were the ones that were responsible for the loss of the weather balloon data. Those are the ones that were responsible for the National Hurricane Center, for example, not being able to go out and train emergency managers on site this spring. Very important training that they do annually that they couldn't travel for this year. So those are the kinds of things that have happened already, not related to this bill that just passed.
And so could somebody
on the $200 million, we'll get you the details on that.
Okay, so what just passed is what you're saying.
$200 million is a lot, so
Yeah.
I want to make sure I give you accurate information.
I have one other question for the scientist. So I have read about the weather balloons and the inability to launch. Has that happened already in South Florida regarding any storms that have already appeared? Has there been no ability to do weather balloons or send in the planes? Has any of that been impacted by what is in place already?
I don't believe there have been any missed launches in South Florida. The losses are concentrated in the Midwest, but I'll point out that when it comes to hurricane forecasting, it really doesn't matter. Those upstream observations are going to affect, when they're missed, will affect 2-day hurricane forecast, 3-day hurricane forecast. So something that's coming, it's getting time to issue watches and warnings. It's probably even worse to lose the observations in the Midwest than maybe it is in Key West.
All right, thank you very much.
Now let's go to Wendy Grossman from 610 WIOD in South Florida.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. And not to politicize the tragedy, but the flooding, getting back to the flooding in Texas, I know the National Weather Service says that it did have adequate staffing and resources to tell people to get out of the way, but obviously there's been a lot of deaths. How much do you think is to blame on the fact that there have been cuts to these offices locally, and, that they weren't able to warn the camp to get the kids out in times and things like that?
Well, I'll make it easier for them, and Congressman Clyburn, you can chime in as well. As I mentioned in my remarks, it appears that the National Weather Service had personnel in place, and they made notifications, and that the communications over the last mile to those communities fell short. This happened in the middle of the night, and time and rigorous oversight is going to tell us more. But what's very clear, and what has been the through line in this whole conversation today, is that, and what was demonstrated by this tragedy, is that we absolutely have to have cutting edge weather research and the strongest forecasting tools and experts at hand. Because sure, there were personnel, and experts in the National Weather Service in those evenings and the day before to send out the watches and warnings, but in the future, as our experts here have talked about, if we don't make sure that we are funding the most cutting edge weather research and the strongest forecasting tools and put those in experts' hands, then the next devastating natural disaster, we might not know, and we could have even more tragedy. So it just is incomprehensible that we would close down weather research laboratories across our country, across our whole country, close them all down and not have them anymore, and leave us blind with our hands tied behind our back when we have the onset of stronger and more frequent natural disasters.
Yeah, if I might add, Congressman, the point I tried to raise is without the research, what we see today will likely become the norm. There will not be the improvements that we've had over the last 20, 30 years. In communication, which was a high priority for the Weather for Research and Forecasting Improvement Innovation Act, was how do we communicate? How do we get the public to take information from a physical scientist and make it understandable for them to take action? As a meteorologist, we're used to dealing with the physical science, not with the social science. And I think, so much of these hazards are local and have to be dealt with locally. And I know for a fact that the Hurricane Center, working with FEMA and the emergency management community, has made great strides in our ability to get people to take action in hurricane events. The storm surge product that James didn't mention yet, but is one of the key ones that has been developed in the last 10 years that takes into account social and economic sciences, behavioral science, to make the product better.
Dr. Adler?
I'd like to add one more thing, although I thought your answer was perfect. The Weather Service did an excellent job that represents the state of the art, the state of our science. What needs to be done is to advance, not just improve the communications, but to advance the state of the science. And what can be done in that area is to do the research necessary to increase the lead time for such events and to forecast the intensity of the precipitation in such an event. And these are the kinds of things that AUML does with regard to hurricanes, but that NOAA research in general can do with regard to flooding events like these.
Okay, let's go to Alicia Maple. Alicia Maple from the Sumter Item.
Hi. The question that I had was, what can local governments and emergency managers do to prepare for any disruptions or delays that there may be during hurricane season? Are there any alternative sources that they should be turning to or protocols that they should be implementing at this time?
Is that Sumter, South Carolina?
Yes, sir, it is.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I think that what we're saying here is there is absolutely no substitute for the warnings. The only way that people can get prepared or prepare themselves to get prepared is for these warnings to be in place. And the warnings are not possible if the funding is not there for those who are the experts and who are doing the warning. So Sumter, I was born and raised in Sumter, and I know that it too. In fact, I'm thinking of all morning, I've been thinking about Hurricane Hazel and what it did to Sumter. Now, that was before almost anybody on the air was born, but it indicates a little bit about what we are faced with in the future. And that is climate change is real in a lot of the communities, like Sumter being inland or not prepared for these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And the only way they can get prepared for them is for those of us running the government to take the science into account, listen to the experts, develop our budgets based upon those predictions, and then do the things that are necessary to fund those people who have the responsibility of carrying out these mandates.
Thank you.
So I have a suggestion
Yes,
to address that question. So one of the things that's going to happen as data go away is that the forecasts are going to be less certain in some cases. And the National Hurricane Center has a product. It's called the Tropical Cyclone Discussion. It comes out every 6 hours. And it's the forecaster's chance to communicate their level of confidence in it and other things in a particular forecast. I think that product sometimes doesn't get enough attention by decision makers who, maybe they see a forecast that's headed off, maybe they're on the edge of the cone, and paying attention to what NHC is communicating in terms of, we feel good about this forecast, maybe they don't feel so good about this forecast, can help them make more appropriate decisions and how to gauge their risk. So I think as data starts stopping, being cognizant of forecasts that have a greater chance of going wrong is something that local officials should monitor.
I want to point out something else that is a really serious potential and I think likely impact of these cuts. And someone referenced that in speaking to folks on the ground about their confidence level in forecasting as a result of these cuts, that their confidence level had reduced. we already have trouble. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that I face as an elected official, and we all do in disaster-prone areas, is making sure that people understand, A, they need to do all the preparation they can in advance to be able to make sure that they can deal with the aftermath of a storm. But even more importantly, for them to heed evacuation warnings. And we know that there are people that just think, oh, it's a false alarm. They're crying wolf, and the term was even used in one of the press conferences from someone at the podium about they were afraid of crying wolf. If we have less confidence in the accuracy of forecasts because people know that laboratories have been closed down, that the impact on the National Weather Service and our weather forecasting ability has been reduced. That's going to make people trust the weather forecasting less. And if they have less trust in the forecast, then they are less likely to evacuate. It stands to reason. They are less likely to make decisions based on what they're being told. And so, changing people's cultural and societal decision making is for sure an impact here, and that will add to the danger. And my staff just put an answer to the question on what Joan, the $200 million that was cut in the big ugly bill, what specifically they cut. It's in the chat now. So, are there any other questions, Mike?
Yes, we have a written question from Kimberly Miller with the Palm Beach Post. Can you go over the potential cuts to Hurricane Hunter flights and the reduction in number of hours in the air? Also, what planes were supposed to be purchased that were cut?
Frank, you want to take that?
Well, right now, my understanding is that the Aircraft Operations Center that operates the NOAA aircraft has the staffing to conduct the missions. What is missing is the research personnel who go on those missions and process the observations and send them high quality control to the National Hurricane Center and to the NOAA modeling centers for use in the forecast guidance. So the flights will go likely and will be tasked, but there may not be the manpower to process the data in the timely manner that is needed for support of the Hurricane Center's mission.
All right.
As to the aircraft cuts, Congresswoman, I think you probably stated that most clearly.
Yeah, we had bipartisan support for $400 million in expenditures to for the new and additional Hurricane Hunter planes. Those are in vital need. We have decrepit planes that need parts replaced constantly, and we need updated and more modern planes that have more research and more capability as a result of the research that has been done. And those that funding has been frozen and pulled back, and they're not moving forward, even though Congress specifically appropriated those funds, and the president does not have the authority to rescind that money.
Christina Vasquez, do you have a follow-up question from Local 10?
I do. One last question, and something I get a lot from viewers. So obviously there's the public safety aspect in terms of people's lives, but I get a lot of questions in terms of property. So these impacts that you are addressing in terms of not being able to be as accurate with the forecast in terms of path and intensity. One question I've received from small business owners and some homeowners is eventually in a place like Florida already struggling with property insurance, what impact could this have to the insurance market down here?
So if people have less confidence in the forecast because the accuracy decreased because of these cuts, then they may be much less likely to take the preparations necessary to protect their homes and their businesses. I often get phone calls from friends, should I put up shutters and things like that. But businesses can take a number of actions that will protect them from being destroyed. and they may not take them if the accuracy is decreased.
And Christina, insurance costs of insurance premiums are based on risk. That's a risk-based decision that actuaries make in insurance companies. And if they believe that there will be more damage as a result of people not knowing or choosing not to trust a forecast as a result of the reductions of information and the improvements that we know we have the ability to develop if we fund that research, then those determinations are likely going to be made that property is more at risk of damage and premiums will go up. We are desperately trying to stabilize the property insurance market here in Florida. Unfortunately, the leadership of this state has not been doing so terribly successfully. This would only make that worse.
To the point about costs, there was a study just earlier this year that looked at just the intensity forecast improvements that have occurred since the beginning of HFIP in 2007. And they estimated that those improvements alone resulted in an average savings of $2 billion every time there's a hurricane landfall in the continental US. They also estimated it, if I recall right, at $5 billion every time there's a major hurricane landfall in the continental US. So if you want to cut the progress that we've made now and not continue to make those strides, then certainly, there's an estimate of what it's going to cost.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we have any other questions from the media? Please raise your hand.
One question. Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this?
This is Joe Fisher. I'm with WPTV in West Palm Beach. I just wanted to talk a little bit more granular about the weather forecasting offices. We have, in the last week, heard back from the Miami field office, and it sounds like we have some Florida expertise on the line. So I just wanted to touch really granular on that office. That right now there's 3 lead meteorologist positions that are vacant. There are 3 additional meteorologist positions that are vacant. Can you talk about one office having those, say 5, 6, 7 vacancies? What the, impact of that is specifically in the Miami area?
I haven't worked at a weather forecast office, and I think for short events, they probably cover okay. But you get these long events that occur over the course of a hurricane season, one after another. And what you could cover for in a one-off is not something you can do repeatedly because you don't have the staff to come in and keep working overtime. And so I think it's something that breaks down over time in the ability to provide the hand-holding to local emergency managers. And you cover it once, but it's not sustainable.
I'll add one thing, having worked as an operational forecaster in the Air Force, when we were short on the number of forecasters, our work week changed where we would work 9 days straight and then just get 1 day off. And that's really rough on people to have to work so much overtime.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I think our experts here have made clear today just how reckless and dangerous the Trump administration's proposal to eliminate NOAA's weather research labs are. These labs, including and especially the Hurricane Research Division in Miami, are not luxuries. They're essential to save lives and property when disaster strikes. We have watched in horror as catastrophic flooding devastated Texas, leaving more than 100 dead and thousands displaced. We must make sure. My goal, I know my colleagues' goal that joined me today, is to make sure that we can stave off these proposed closures because we know the impact of those closures. It will be devastating in the future. And we just have to make sure that people have all the information they need to be able to make the kinds of decisions that are often made very quickly in short time frames. And we can't afford to not have the ability to make sure we can continue to improve the forecasts and give people as much notice as possible. It would be unconscionable if the impact of this really grievous decision made by the Trump administration comes to pass and we lose lives, have property, property insurance costs increase, and have, devastating economic and life-altering impacts on millions. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you so much to our experts and my colleagues.